Hey guys, what's happening? So getting into more talk about Marvel Legacy and following a number of the plot threads that go throughout Infinity Wars, the War of Realms, Thanos Wins, Doctor Strange Damnation, just to name a few. In this video, once again, I want to tie some of these threads together and stir up the conversation of some of the inevitable events that are to come. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so recently we got Thanos Legacy #1. And Thanos Legacy #1, in my opinion, is like Thanos going back in time, which he actually did towards the very end of Thanos Wins, but it's like Thanos going back in time and starting his new legacy. And this makes it very appropriate for the renumbering, because with his main motivation, after seeing who he would become millions of years from now, and his main motivation being not to become that version of himself, Thanos' legacy is really like your telling of that story or how that story is to come about. And I really like how this is unfolding and even taking a different direction for his character. And one of those examples goes along with one of my earlier predictions of him turning away from Mistress Death and really sticking to that decision. And I'm really glad that he did, because that just wasn't a healthy relationship. But with him doing this prior to the Thanos Wins event, that was one of the many things that foreshadowed his decision towards the end. And in previous videos, we talked about the final battle between future Thanos and present Thanos, and present day Thanos winning by going back in time and making sure that his future self wouldn't exist by just going back in time and making different decisions. And in our most recent talk about this, I did a video talking about where Thanos arrived when he took that piece of the Time Stone, which was, as we suspected in previous videos, the same time and place that he left when he was taken by Cosmic Ghost Rider. And this is something we discovered through the course of the Infinity Wars event, with us seeing him there with the Chitauri, hyping them up for the next battle and telling them that he knows he's gonna win because he's seen the future, and then he's killed right in front of them, which was not very encouraging, but surprising nonetheless. And for a while it was a mystery who had killed him, stabbing him through the heart then decapitating him, but later we found out this mysterious person who went by the name Requiem, who Thanos had recognized seconds before his death, had turned out to be Gamora. And so with Thanos being killed here, this is not the end of his story. In fact, it's kind of where Thanos' legacy begins. And really soon we're going to talk about where he went after he died. But before I get to that, I want to talk about where he went shortly before he was killed. Because when he arrived back in the present day, in the exact same place that he departed from to go into the future with Cosmic Ghost Rider, when he first arrived, when he first came back to the present, the first person he went to go see was Mephisto. And at this point in time in present day, following the conclusion of Doctor Strange Damnation, Mephisto had been imprisoned in a Vegas penthouse, which was literally the Wong decision, like it was Wong's idea. But when Thanos came back before he was killed, this is where he went to see Mephisto, and visiting him for reasons that are pretty obvious. Because along with undoing his future self, he also has plans to undo his future accomplice, and that accomplice being Cosmic Ghost Rider. And one of the first things you're probably thinking is why? Because if Thanos came back in time to change his mind and change his decision, how could this version of Frank Castle pose as a threat? Well, actually there are a number of reasons, and the first and most obvious would be that he was able to pull it off and do so without dying, which is something we saw through the course of time took place in pretty much every other instance. But with Cosmic Ghost Rider being able to combat Thanos, and also being one of those few characters who are truly unkillable, and not to forget that his chains are made from the bones of Sidorak. I love that. But even with all these things, the power that Frank Castle has obtained with both the Spirit of Vengeance and the Power Cosmic and Unbreakable Chains, the biggest threat that I'd say he poses to Thanos would have to be his memory, because he's the only person who knows future Thanos through and through, and better yet, present and future Thanos. And we discovered this in the recent Thanos annual, where Cosmic Ghost Rider literally sat outside of space and time in front of the gates of Valhalla for an unmeasured period of time, talking about different instances with Thanos and just reciting a number of the stories that the older Thanos had told him. And with Cosmic Ghost Rider's soul, Frank Castle, entering Valhalla and losing his power only to have it restored, along with the millions of years of memories and partial insanity, this makes Frank Castle a threat that in the eyes of Thanos, he can't allow to happen. And with Cosmic Ghost Rider knowing all of this through the penance stare and through the number of stories he was told, Thanos is aware that he could come for him. And Cosmic Ghost Rider even existing with his memories even possibly holds the key to restoring that future version of Thanos. And present Thanos is not having that, not even in the slightest bit. And this is why as soon as he returned, he went to Vegas to see Mephisto. And Thanos did this with the sole purpose of telling Mephisto threatening Mephisto not to ever bother Frank Castle, and literally telling him to leave Frank Castle alone altogether. And so to me, what's very interesting initially is like he doesn't even know who he's talking about. But the reason I say this is interesting is because if you think back to when Mephisto had taken Frank Castle, he had let him know that he had been watching him for some time. And this can mean a number of things, whether it's Frank Castle's contribution in the War of Realms prior to him dying in that huge battle with Thanos, or it can simply mean that Thanos going back in time and mentioning Frank Castle put Frank Castle on Mephisto's radar. And that's just a strange, trippy possibility that, if true, would just tie all space and time into a big old knot. But Thanos coming here shows us that that was top priority to him once returning here to the present. But when he comes to make this threat to Mephisto, which is nothing new by the way, but when he comes to make this threat to Mephisto, and Mephisto starts trying to guess what it is that he's here for, whether it's Hela's recent nuptials, when Mephisto says this takes Thanos by surprise. And after his death by way of Requiem that we've seen in Infinity Wars, we find out that when Requiem killed him, which is actually Gamora, but when she killed him, she sent him exactly where he wanted to go. And not exactly when he wanted to go, but it was where he wanted to go. And that was straight to hell. Straight to Hela. And when he arrives here, there is some unfinished business that he wants to speak with her about. Because for one, it's obvious that prior to this time, they do have some history. And at this current time, she has also made plans, including her nuptial plans, in contingency to what's brewing up with the War of Realms. And within that plan, she was going to marry Balder the Brave for a larger army to face against Cinder. And even Balder had his own plans anyway. But this plan kind of fell through on Balder's end when Loki killed Thor. Which really isn't what it looks like. It's more of a secret plan that Thor had asked Loki to participate in just so he could get to Valhalla. But seeing this happen in Niflheim at the wedding, it made Balder change his mind. But what's even crazier is that after Gamora had killed Thanos, he arrives here in Niflheim. And this is something that not only stays true to him steering away from Mistra's death, but also having a discussion with Hela about a promise that he had made in Unworthy Thor, which we'd also seen reference to during the time Jane Foster had carried the mantle. And in this promise, Thanos promised that he would help Hela regain her realm. But when he arrives here, literally like seconds after Balder called off the wedding, which is also the same time that Cinder from the Dark Council arrives with her attack on Niflheim because of her allegiance with Malekith, Thanos arrives here right after Hela is left at the altar by Balder, only to get broken up with by Thanos. Like, this really ain't Hela's day. But when Thanos arrives here, he's like, Hela, look, I done did everything I need to do on my end of the bargain, and as far as I see it, we're done. And from her perspective, this battle is like the prime example of what she wanted his help for. And she's like, how have you helped? You haven't lifted a finger. And he's like, okay, finger lifted. And he shoots one member of Cinder's army, and he just walks away. And though Hela suspects that he's leaving because of his love for someone else, Thanos replies that that is exactly the case, and it's his love for the Infinity Stones that he chooses to pursue. And when Hela says they will be the death of you, and Thanos is like, I hope so, it just makes me think like I really wouldn't be surprised if this Thanos also became death, much like the unconnected Starling series that we talked about not long ago. But it is hilarious here when, after being dumped by two men back to back, Cinder walks up to Hela and is like, man, that was hard to watch. Like, I just had to tell you that before you lose everything. Like, just straight up savagery. So now, before I go back to Thanos and his dead body and what happened with it, just to share a couple more thoughts on Mephisto and Thanos threatening him before he was killed, I do have to say that much like in the previous video where we talked about where Thanos went when he first traveled back in time, I do still also believe that this will lend the opportunity for Mephisto to once again pursue the Silver Surfer. And in that video, I went way more into depth in how it happened the first time and how it turned out and how it could happen again. And for that reason, I'm not gonna repeat all of that all over again. But I got a link in the description for anybody who wants to check that out or even get a refresher. But the main reason I'm mentioning it now is because I think you should definitely keep it in the back of your mind, because not only could it signal the return of the Fallen One, but it also could connect to the mysterious reappearance of Jack Hammer, aka Weasel, in Deadpool Assassin, which we had also talked about in the most recent Deadpool Assassin video, once again link below. But because of the deal that he had made with Mephisto to receive the soul of Peter Parker, which later changed to Mephisto wanting the soul of Deadpool instead, I believe that these are schemes that Mephisto's also likely running in the background, especially with Weasel resurfacing and we haven't seen him since Deadpool Spider-Man team up. And much like us, the reader, having our suspicions about Weasel working with Wade Wilson once again, as expected, Deadpool has his suspicions too. And as a result, in Marvel Legacy, Deadpool is finding these little secrets that Weasel's keeping one by one. So don't be surprised if that also comes around full circle. But getting back to Thanos, who had the worst, hands down, where's Gamora moment. Okay, and maybe not the worst, but it's up there. But getting back to his death where he was stabbed through the heart and decapitated by Gamora, which she took his head right after. Moments after she left the rest of his body, a stream of hellfire is so graciously, ever so graciously, being poured on it. And being poured isn't necessarily the word I think I was looking for, but I think you guys get the picture. But standing over Thanos' dead corpse, we find Cosmic Ghost Rider paying his last disrespects. And I gotta say, like, even if you Cosmic Ghost Rider, Frank Castle might want to get that checked out, because I don't think that's supposed to be one of his abilities, because this just isn't normal on any power chart. So he might want to get that checked out. But either way, while he's standing over the corpse of Thanos, a group of the Chitauri dogs come to chew on the body, and as a result, they trigger a booby trap that was left on the body of Thanos. And shortly after, we find out that someone else was waiting for this to be triggered so they can retrieve an item from his corpse. And that person happened to be Eros, the brother of Thanos, also known as Star Fox. And it makes sense that he's here because aside from Cosmic Ghost Rider and possibly Gamora, as far as Thanos' history up till this point in time, I'd have to say that Eros would be the one person who would know the most about him and know this secret. Because when Eros arrives and he cuts Thanos open, to which, by the way, Cosmic Ghost Riders look at him like, how could you? That's just terrible. Who would do something like that? Like, he should talk right after what he just got caught doing. But Eros tells him that he needs to remove from the corpse of Thanos something around his heart that will start an endgame that will burn the universe to the ground. And I'm sorry, like, if I was there, I'd have been like, well, how you burn the universe to the ground if it's the universe and then there's no ground, you know? And then Eros would have told me to shut up, and then Frank Castle would be like, no, he's got a point. But what he removes from around the heart of Thanos is actually his will and testament, which means on this drive of sorts is everything that belongs to Thanos, and most likely the location to all of it and the listing of to whom he's given rite of passage to, which is all probably 99.9% Gamora. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. How do you see this panning out in the near future? And when Thanos making his next move, very clear, he said he's going after the Infinity Stones. But what will his very next move be? Because we know by way of seeing King Thor's future that Hela lost everything, and eventually Loki will inherit the Necro Sword. But let me know what you guys think. Drop your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.